Hello there, my name's Ollie. I'm the news editor of the Glasgow Guardian. Today I am with Kaukab Stewart, who is the SNP candidate for Glasgow Kelvin for the upcoming Scottish parliamentary elections. So,
Hi there.
hi there. Just double check, did I get your name correct?
Kaukab, yeah.
Kaukab,
Kaukab
yes,
Stewart.
good. That was my biggest. These things are one of my biggest fears. So we'll get right to it. So, Kaukab, my first question is, why should Glasgow students vote for you?
Well, Ollie, the thing is, I've been a teacher for 30 years, and I don't think that you're going to find anybody who's more committed to education than myself. Not only have I been teaching, but I've also been involved previously in the EIS, and currently I'm a member of the NASUWT, and I've been through the university system myself and seen how it's changed and developed and, coped with the challenges of sort of like the future and modern day sort of pressures that are on students. And I've also got two children, both of whom chose to go through the university system as well decades later. So I can assure the students that I'm absolutely on their side, and I understand a lot of the concerns, and also I like to engage with students who are mainly young people but also mature students as well, and listen to their concerns and hear what their pressures are and see what I can do if I was elected as a member of the Scottish Parliament to make sure that they can pursue education as stress-free a way as possible.
That's great. So our second question today, during the pandemic, do you think that adequate support has been given to students?
Well, I think that, obviously it's been a challenging time to provide the correct support for everybody because it was, a global pandemic, and all of us had to rapidly upskill ourselves and become aware of sort of the supports that were needed. I certainly, as a teacher, I know that I had to teach in a completely different way, embrace online learning and teaching, which was something that I had never done before, and we literally had overnight to prepare for that. So whilst I think that the government and the professionals like myself did everything that we could, knowing what we knew at the time, clearly hindsight's a great thing, and there were things that could have been done better. However, I would say that the areas that we could have improved on were sort of investment in the infrastructure that already existed. For instance, the digital divide. Although I know in Glasgow City Council we're quite well ahead of sort of like rolling it out pre-pandemic digital devices, but actually the pandemic brought it into sharp contrast that it was not enough. So clearly there are lessons there learned. And for students as well, I think that, obviously it was very difficult to do that rapid response of whether they return to university and stay on campus or whether they stay at home. And then when they did return and, the managing of sort of outbreaks and stuff. I just lived down the road from Glasgow University and all the others as well. And I took a walk around just to see, what was happening. And my heart went out to everybody. I think it was a time of confusion. So whilst I think, in short, the people that were making the decisions made them to the best of their, abilities at the time, there are lessons that can be learned.
That's good. So relating to that, mental health services have been severely underfunded, especially at university, some would argue. How do you plan on addressing Scotland's mental health crisis?
Mental health is an enormous issue. Again, I think I've got an advantage of having sort of a wee further depth of understanding in that. We have definitely I've noticed more sort of mental health pressures on families and sort of young children, and it's secondary, so that's where but these secondary children are obviously a lot of them are hoping to go on to university as well, and I think that it's the connection. That's what, you know, I've noticed, is being able to get the support rapidly at the right time, and that relies on staffing, where, you know, if you can get to your GP and you can get medical interventions, which are sometimes necessary, but talking therapies, I don't think, generally speaking, as a nation, we've never been good at talking about mental health anyway. But what we need to do is not only sort of promote that through media, that it's good to talk about it, but we then need to back it up by providing the professionals who are suitably qualified to support people with their mental health anxieties. And I think going forward, I'm glad to see that, you know, the Scottish Government you know, has committed to providing further funding to provide the services required for that.
That's great. So relating to COVID-19, obviously young people are concerned about their job prospects for the post-COVID-19 economy. How would you and the SNP help with this issue?
Well, I think there's a raft of issues that have been sort of like rolled out in the last few days. However, I think the one that's sort of most important is the Youth Guarantee Scheme, which, you know, guarantees sort of every child the right to employment, education, apprenticeships, or formal volunteering opportunities. Because whilst, you know, I'm a benefit of free education myself, I also know that it's not for everybody, and, you know, quite rightly we put a good value on further and higher education, but we also have to value you know, our young people that want to go into trades, for instance, apprenticeships, and to make sure that, you know, they are properly paid and there is security, and, you know, not only the companies are benefiting, but actually the young people are able to go on to positive destinations, and we have a good record of that, you know.
That's good. So what role do you believe the Scottish Government should play in university?
Well, in university, I mean, from my point of view, from, you know, an educationalist point of view, I think that they have to trust that you know, the sort of like the pedagogy of good learning and teaching. They have to trust the professionals with that. Just as sort of like health policy is led by sort of like, you know, evidence-based and science-based, it should be the same for education. You know, there is plenty good research out there. They should be trusting the professionals. And then from that, it's obviously funding, you know, to make sure that there is proper funding so that we can invest. It's all about investing in the future, as far as I see it. You know, it's if we really want to tap into the potential of Scotland, then it means that we need to have a skilled workforce, and that includes the creative arts, by the way, as well. And I'm always a wee champion for the STEM sort of subjects too, especially for underrepresented groups, you know, women in particular. So the promotion of those, investing in research and development, I'm a big fan of, you know, doing that. I think that that is real life learning, where students can, you know, do their research projects and make real impacts in business and industry and technologies. And again, you know, we've got a fantastic record of that. You know, I mean, look at Dundee, for instance. You know, there's amazing sort of innovative work that comes from there. So supporting research and development. Also making links, and that is, you know, a governmental role, I think, is to develop the partnerships from universities with local communities, but also international links abroad, and having that joint working. I mean, look at the research that went on to develop the COVID vaccine, for instance. All these scientists that were getting together from across the world and working collaboratively, and, you know, amazing results from that.
So also relating to university, do you think financial support for students in Scotland is good enough? So for example, students from households with income above £35,000 a year, they get a loan of up to £4,750 per year as their student. Do you think that's enough for undergraduate students, or do you think that could be increased?
Well, from my own point of view, I would say that it could always be increased. And I come, the background that I come from was when I went to university, my fees were paid, it was free tuition. But on top of that, we actually got a grant. And this will make you weep because it was 2,500 was the full grant. It was means tested. I got the full grant. And after I did work 1 day a week, I had a part-time job. And aside from that, after 4 years of university, I graduated and I was 50 quid overdrawn. I mean, having two children gone through the system and their loans that just appear to be endless. So I would be interested in looking at some kind of grant system. And again, somebody like me, if I get elected to the Scottish Parliament, the views on education, because I'm so passionate about it that I can bring to the table, I can push people for further funding that doesn't necessarily follow the loans model, if you know what I mean, because that is a loan. The temptation is there to spend it and, all the rest of it, but there has to be some kind of grant system that goes along with it that eases that burden of not having to pay it all back.
And
And then
also,
there's also other things like, support with housing, there's a raft of things, it's not just that one bit. It's making sure that, you have secure employment, that it's living wages, dealing with sort of, the 0-hour contracts and stuff, dealing with that, also housing, support for housing. So it's all of those, free transport, for instance, and I think we've committed to sort of free transport up to sort of 2021, 22. So, all of these things come together to make life a little bit easier so students can concentrate on learning as opposed to having to worry about how they're going to feed themselves.
it's also linked to it as well, something I should probably ask you, as I think that's not as broad as much. Regarding postgraduate student finance, so SAS, the Student Award Agency for Scotland, they offer a tuition fee loan up to £5,500 and a living cost loan of up to £4,500, and so that combined that gives you £10,000 for many courses, some at the University of Glasgow, and this isn't even enough to cover the full tuition fees. Do you think more can do? Would you push for increased student finance for postgraduate students?
I think that that's definitely something that I would be open to exploring. I mean, at the moment, I could be wrong, of course, but my thought was that you got funding for a degree and for a postgraduate. So if that has changed, which it may have changed, of course, because I did a postgraduate and that was funded. So if that has changed, then I would actually quite like to review that so that people can, get one of everything, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it depends on the course. I know courses to do teaching are a lot cheaper, but I think it really depends on the course. Some courses I was looking at were about £10,000, but it might be more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Well, we can always fact check at the end. I'm sure someone will know the answer to this. Okay, moving on. The climate crisis is obviously a pressing issue. What actions will you and the SNP plan on taking to tackle the climate crisis in Scotland?
Well, we do have COP26 coming up in Glasgow, and I hope, at the moment it's going to go ahead as far as we know, and at that, I hope that Glasgow will be able to showcase some of the stuff that it is doing now. I know that the emissions targets have been set for 2050, and Glasgow's gone further than that. We've actually said by 2030. Now, I know that that's ambitious, and we've been criticised for, can't even reach the targets we have, but actually it's good to have ambition because it keeps you sharp and keeps you focused. So already we've got they've increased the fleet of electric buses, for instance, and for Glasgow Kelvin in particular, and for students, very important to make sure that they can transport safely and cheaply and in a green way, to get those buses along Dumbarton Road, for instance, get them along Byres Road, Great Western Road. So it's all the arterial routes, which are very important. Also the active travel. I'm a big fan of active travel. So the safe cycle lanes, a lot of which was sort of like, and pedestrianised zones. All of Kelvin Way was pedestrianised during the COVID, and then it obviously worked very well. So that has been expanded. And I'd like to see lots more safe walking zones and cycle routes as well, and the bikes that are available that people can hire. So all those kind of things. Also the deposit return schemes, they're there. So all of these things together, I think, will, help. But in the Kelvin constituency, there are people that are very attached to their cars as well. So it is a matter of education and realizing that we're looking at a bigger picture here, and reducing emissions is actually good for everybody, so re-educating people, incentivizing them to go 2 legs, 2 wheels, or, buses.
Good. So obviously, as you're the SNP candidate, a big issue for you is Scottish independence, and Scottish independence is becoming more favoured by young people. So, for example, there was a recent poll from the Times which indicated that approximately 71% of young voters support Scottish independence when undecided votes are taken out. Why do you think that Scottish young people should support an independent Scotland?
Well, that's lovely. Seeing those statistics is great, because that hasn't always been the case. So I'm glad that, the SNP has sort of made that case and appealed to students. I think it's because, independence is sort of, it's ambitious for the country. It's hopeful, and it's a really positive vision. So that message of an internationalist, outward-looking, fairer, socially just, left of centre party that wants to promote those values in an independent Scotland, where everybody is made to feel welcome, people's individual skills are valued, the culture is respected. Not only Scottish culture, but also, worldwide cultures. And you'll know that Kelvin constituency is the 3rd most diverse constituency in Scotland. Glasgow South is first, I think it's Edinburgh Central, and then Glasgow Kelvin, with the amount of residents that were not born in Scotland, let alone Glasgow, which is fantastic. And somebody like myself, who also wasn't born in Scotland, I think is a perfect match to be able to represent everybody here. But yeah, I think it's wonderful that young people don't think that they're too poor, that they're too wee and they're not clever enough, that they feel that by having all believers of a small independent nation, that we have that drive and ambition to govern ourselves and to shape a society with values that are important to us.
Cool. Would you maybe briefly explain the SNP's plan for the NHS and how you plan on supporting it?
Well, the NHS obviously has been under an enormous amount of pressure, and I was delighted to see the 4% increase in salaries, and that's actually a progressive increase. So, the lower your wages, the higher. So some people will be getting, higher than that, and the more that you earn, the less. So it's progressive, basically. It's based on that progressive model, which I think is fantastic. If you compare that, with the Tories, the 1%, frankly, that was a bit of an insult. There was also the £500 thank you payment, and whilst £500 doesn't sound a lot, it's better than just the clap and, calling people heroes and things. I mean, they are heroes, of course they are. They're doing their job, but it's very important for us to put our money where our mouth is. So the wages are very important there. Also, Nicola Sturgeon, just over the last few days, announced that should we get back into government, and if I get elected, I shall certainly be supporting this, is the opening up and, well, further increasing, because we've got the specialist cancer treatment centres, but to actually increase that provision, because of everything's been concentrated on COVID, but you know, there are other sort of like medical areas that need to be picked up there. So that's very important. And also elective centres, to have smaller elective centres so the backlogs can be dealt with there as well. So all of those things together, along with, you know, maintaining free prescriptions, because remember, you know, elsewhere in the country they pay prescriptions, so that helps as well. And continue to build on the fact that, you know, we have per capita, we do have the highest level of GP allocation, you know, so to maintain that and to further enhance it.
Cool, thank you very much for that. So recently it was announced that Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government were going to nationalise ScotRail. I'm not sure they already have or not, but they're going to basically going to bring ScotRail into public ownership. And looking at your Twitter, I believe you're a supporter of this. I'm assuming. Yeah. So that's good to hear. Do you think buses in Glasgow should be next to be publicly owned? Like, for example, as they are in Edinburgh under the Lothian buses model, whereas in Glasgow, obviously, there's you have at least 3 different bus companies, and you know, First Bus, Stagecoach, and the Girls, which can be confusing for passengers or users of bus services. Is that something you would endorse and would like to see the Scottish Government do?
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in exploring that. I actually went to university in Edinburgh and lived there for a number of years. So I'm very familiar with Lothian buses, and I have to say that, you know, it was a great service, you know, and what it meant was that the less frequent routes were able to be offset by the busier routes. So that's what happened. Is that if it's not necessarily for profit and a private company, then it can actually prioritize getting people around, if you know what I mean. That's the priority. The passengers are the priority, and also the employees, you know, to make sure that everybody gets paid what they should be getting paid, and the routes are protected. So I'd like to see that here. I know in Kelvin it has been an issue because certain parts of the constituency don't have regular bus services. You know, if you go towards sort of like Kelvin Dale, for instance, yeah, folks struggle there, and trying to persuade sort of like private companies, it's profit before anything else, which is what they do, you know. So I would definitely be interested in further expanding that by looking at the option for Glasgow to do that.
That's great, good to hear. So recently there has been a petition to increase street lighting at the Kelvingrove and Kelvingrove Park due to a number of several sexual crimes that have happened in the area over the past few years. This petition has over 9,500 signatures and has also been endorsed by all the student unions at Glasgow University. Would you support and endorse this petition, and will you campaign to have Glasgow City Council increase street lighting in those areas to allow students to feel safer and walking home at dark? I know this is like an issue that's really for the council, but as Glasgow Kelvin, as you're the MSP for Glasgow Kelvin representative, it would be important to know if you would support this move.
Well, I've looked into this because obviously, sort of, again, it's not far from where I stay, and it's an important issue for students, but also the wider community around there as well. What I will do is say that I am supportive working with Glasgow City Council to find a solution for this, because we can't have people feeling unsafe. Now, sort of, I'm in my research, because obviously, you know, in education, and you look for evidence, and you make your decisions based on that. So at the moment, I'm just reading some stuff about the Kelvingrove Park, and looking at sort of the biodiversity sort of like value that it has there as well. And we do, I mean, I suppose, you know, we're very lucky that we've got lots of species there of animals as well as plants and all the rest of it. So having high level floodlighting on throughout the night is going to have, or could have, as I said, I've not, you know, I'm open at the moment. I'm going through a listening phase on this at the moment and gathering evidence on it. It could have an impact there. So it's looking at that. So another option is the type of lighting that you have as well. So looking for creative solutions of whether it's sort of like movement triggered, but then of course, you know, we've got not only the Highland foxes, but we've also got all the other animals that can trigger that. So that is there, and also looking at sort of like, the arterial sort of like pathways, the main bits as well. There's also an impact on local residents too, not at the moment, but I have lived near a place that's got the lighting, and when that comes on, or if it's on throughout the night, that also has an impact. So I think, as I said to you, I am very open to working with, all the stakeholders to see, what we can look at to make sure that we can get the balance, that people feel safe, but, reducing impacts on, the communities, local environments, but ensuring that people's safety is there as well.
That's great. So a recent internal report revealed huge racial problems at University of Glasgow, and last year an internal review of Police Scotland found racial bias. So how would you and the SNP plan on helping Scotland become a safe place for people of colour?
Well, being a person of colour, this is something that's very important to me. I was disgusted with the Sewell report that was recently published, which basically denied that institutional racism existed. I will say to you that absolutely it exists. I have faced it and I fight it, constantly. You just need to look at the Scottish Parliament to see that there's never been a woman of colour that's been elected to the Scottish Parliament, and you can't deny that there is something wrong with our institutions. Straight away, if you look at any, including Glasgow University, if you look at, the higher up posts and everything, what is the ethnic balance there? What is the gender balance there? So when that report came out, I did actually arrange to have a meeting with Glasgow University, and I did so, and we talked about the action plan that Glasgow University has made up in order to address this. I know that they have set up sort of a group to look at this, and it's going to be chaired by Professor Jeff Palmer, who I greatly respect and value his opinion. I don't think he's going to turn around and tell you that there's no institutional racism anytime soon. So I am working with Glasgow University on that, and should I be elected, I have said to them that I will be monitoring, their progress and keeping an eye on it, so that it's not further kicking it onto the long grass, or we're going to have an inquiry, but actually nothing changes. I want to have measurable targets and the evidence to actually support that there has been an improvement on that. So I'm pleased that, they're addressing the situation, but I will be holding them to account on that.
That's great. So in the upcoming Scottish parliamentary election, students have 2 votes, which is unique in obviously in Scottish parliamentary elections. So you set out to students why you should give their first vote to you for you to represent them for Glasgow Kelvin. Why should students what would you say to students for the second vote? Why should they give their second vote to the SNP, especially, for example, pro-independent students give their second vote to the SNP as opposed to, say, the Scottish Greens or Alex Salmond's Alba Party?
Yeah, it's a very valid question. I can see that. However, sort of, I don't think gaming the system sort of like works. I mean, you're talking about tactical voting and stuff, and as a representative of the SNP, I'm never going to advocate, giving a vote to another party. I'm not, unlike the Tories who sometimes seem to be saying, well, vote Labour or something, I'm not going to do that. It's both votes SNP. So the first vote is a constituency vote, so that one goes to the parliamentarian that you want to represent you. And I say that for the second one, it's which party do you want to govern Scotland? Because that's what the second vote is going to help in order to do that, to get that majority. And, remember, overwhelmingly amount of young people support independence. We need to get to that situation where we've got the referendum on the table. Post-COVID, obviously, that's the priority. And in order for that to happen, it's the SNP that needs to have that overwhelming majority, which gives us that clear mandate for us to put that referendum forward. And that is in a legal and sensible manner, which is recognised and it cannot be denied. And the only way to do that is by voting SNP with both votes. Because let's face it, Boris Johnson, he's not afraid of, Alba. He's not afraid of the Greens in Scotland. He's afraid of the SNP getting an overwhelming majority and getting that mandate for Indy Ref 2. So both votes must go to SNP.
And one final question for today. If you're elected to represent Glasgow Kelvin and the SNP do form the Scottish Government, which policy are you most looking forward to implementing for Scotland, and why? So be it independence, something to do with the climate crisis, COVID-19 recovery, child credit, or when were you most looking forward to, would you say, in your personal opinion?
Yeah, in my personal opinion, there's so much that's there. I suppose it would have to be sort of education based, and to do with children. And they've stolen my thunder a wee bit, I have to say, with adopting the UNCRC into Scottish law. So that's been done, and I suppose I would like to sort of like build on that. The rights of the child are so important to me, and again, my thunder's been stolen a wee bit, because the right to play and putting funding into making sure that every single playground has been it will be refurbished. So that was my answer up until a few days ago. It should have been, so I suppose now, if we're taking it further, it would be looking at immigration, trying to get, and I know, in an independent Scotland, if we had the full powers over immigration policy and legislation, which we currently don't, then we would be able to, take our place in the world, because we are open, and we're not full up in Scotland. And if you look at the current immigration sort of like policies and the effect on asylum seekers, on refugees, absolutely draconian and, just dreadful. So for us to have control over immigration policies, that would be wonderful. And also, I can't help but say I would be very interested, and I've said it before, is looking at the equalities legislation, the 2010 Act. In my opinion, it's now out of date. For instance, whilst it is okay, for 50-50 women to put in procedures to positive action procedures, that same right doesn't exist for other protected characteristics. So I think it's due an overhaul. So immigration and equalities.
That's great. Well, that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much, Miss Stewart. It was a pleasure speaking to you. And that is the end of the interview. Remember to vote in Scottish parliamentary elections on 9th of May, is it?
The 6th of May.
6th of May. Oh,
6th of May.
I'm getting fired. Thanks again, Miss Stewart. Thank you for watching.
Lovely. And it was lovely to meet you.